So welcome to today's meeting of persons with disabilities. I believe our first item, did you say, was the approval of the minutes?
It is, but 1, 2, 3. I don't believe we have a quorum. Carolyn let me know that she was joining, but she might have to leave early, and it looks like she dropped off. So we currently have 4 people. So we'll have to put that later if anyone else joins.
No problem. And is it all? And then the next item was the approval of the agenda.
Non-agenda comment.
Non-agenda comment. So I actually have a non-agenda comment, just an awareness for our committee. If I had realized it earlier, I might have actually put it on the agenda. But I had a conversation last night that there are several organizations, like the one I'm going to highlight this second, but it's not the only one, is the Chula Vista. I learned has on their agenda on this upcoming Wednesday, and I will just personally be going there to comment by Zoom. They want to pull away the call-in portion, so they would no longer have the ability for people to participate by calling in, and that they would have to go there in person. So just an awareness, and if we can bring this in our own worlds, like, if Jessica knows of things going on in Carlsbad and Oceanside, or that those are that less accessibility is coming up on agendas. If we can keep ourselves abreast of it. I actually was going to talk. I just learned about this last night, so I am going to talk to Todd about maybe putting it on our agenda so that we can actually weigh in as a committee. And I have already put it on Nora Supervisor, well, Chair now, Nora Vargas's awareness that, although obviously the county has nothing to do per se with the individual school boards, but it's just the idea of bringing that awareness that we don't want to be diminishing accessibility, but we want to be increasing it. So I just wanted to put that on people's radar. Are there any other public comments or comments that have nothing to do with the agenda, public or committee?
This is Jessica Kramer. I have a brief comment. I had the absolute blessing and pleasure to attend the National ADA Coordinator Training Conference over the last couple of days on Tuesday and Wednesday. I was also able to participate in getting an advanced certification in the ADA and law enforcement. And during that time, I was in a conference room all day with, I guesstimate, about 75 law enforcement professionals, and had the incredible pleasure to be trained by law enforcement professionals. Most of the people that I got to know and sat through the conference with work in the jail and detention facilities as ADA coordinators or correction officers. And it was an absolutely enlightening experience. I learned so much, and I'm really looking forward to sharing everything I learned with everyone here on the meeting today. And then Susan, I very much want to welcome you to the meeting today, and what an honor it is to have somebody with your life experience and employment skill set here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. Anyone else? Okay, then I would love for our guest speaker to continue his introduction or start his official introduction and talk to us.
My name's Dave Brown. I'm the assistant sheriff. And to put that into context, the sheriff's department has the elected sheriff and an under sheriff that they appoint. It's like a vice president, if you will. They're the number 2, and they're appointed by the elected sheriff. And there are 3 assistant sheriffs. One assistant sheriff is in charge of all the detention facilities, all the jails. One assistant sheriff is in charge of all the courts and human resources. And one assistant sheriff is in charge of all law enforcement. So what falls under me is the 20 plus patrol stations, communications center, which are 911 and our dispatch, our crime lab, a lot of regional things, helicopters, SWAT teams, volunteer services, and most of the community relations lands in my shop. I have about 1,000 sworn that work for me and another 500 professional staff that are not sworn. And that's one of the things that the public doesn't always see, but a great many of our employees, a third of them in law enforcement, don't have a gun. They're not doing what you consider police work, but they're doing police work. From a big picture, I'll go into myself a little bit. So like everybody else, I initially started with the county in 1990. I did a year at juvenile hall and a program that was after a campo, sort of a reintegration back into regular schools with home supervision called the Youth Day Center. I'm not even sure if probation still has an operation, but I was a PE teacher for them while I was a senior at San Diego State. And back in those days, as soon as you got out of college, you were kicked off your parents' health insurance. So I needed a job, and I already was a county employee. And I ran into a recruiter, and I had no intention of doing this as a career. Next thing I know, I'm working in the Vista jail. So fast forward 2 or 3 years, I went to the detentions academy. So I was back then they were called a correctional deputy. And we go through an academy that just teaches us how to work the jail. It doesn't teach you the other stuff about police work. So after 2.5 years, I took another test. They sent me back to another academy that was 6 months long. And that was all about law enforcement work. And then from there, I was sent to Vista Patrol. I spent a little more than a decade there. I was a patrolman in Vista. Then I was a community policing deputy for a number of years in Vista. Then I was an area detective. We call it an area detective. They sort of handle the cases, the non-specialized cases in that town or that city. I made sergeant from there. I went to the downtown court for a year. Then I got sent to Ramona. I needed a map book to find it, but I was sent to Ramona where I was essentially the number 2 because there's a lieutenant and 2 sergeants, but for a while just one in a small town. And I ended up seeing an entirely different type of law enforcement as if you were in another country, and I loved it. I spent 3 years in Ramona as a supervisor, as the watch commander and the sergeant and the jack of all trades. Patrol sergeant, detective sergeant. It's such a small place. There was only 17 deputies assigned there. And then I was picked to go to homicide. I became the supervisor of a homicide team. I spent 3.5 years doing that. If you've lived in the county a long time, I ran the John Gardner, Chelsea King homicide investigations. Got to be on TV. They did a Dateline show and handled about 28 homicide convictions there. And I thought I found my calling, but next thing you know, they promoted me. I became a lieutenant. I went to the communication center. I went to criminal intelligence and worked undercover for a few years. Then I became the station commander for Imperial Beach. So I was the police chief for Imperial Beach for a year, became a captain, back to the communication center, was the sheriff's special assistant, like an adjutant, if you will, or some people joke I carried the briefcase, but I was the sheriff's assistant. And I did that. And then I went to San Marcos where I was the police chief for the city of San Marcos. And somebody mentioned they were appointed by Jim Desmond. He was the mayor of San Marcos when I was there, so I was his police chief. I also oversaw Valley Center. Somebody else lives up in Valley Center. The lieutenant there reports to the San Marcos captain. Right when COVID hit, became in March of 2020, they made me the patrol commander. So I was taken out of the field back to headquarters, and a rough year to run all the patrol stations, but I did that. And for the last 2 years, I was promoted again to run all of law enforcement. So I have 3 commanders, one for investigations, one for patrol, and one for support, which is emergency services, helicopters, comm centers, and the crime lab. I am retiring in 46 work days and 2 hours. So at the end of a 33-year run. And I was very happy to hear a couple of people talk about how they were retired. And every time I meet somebody who was a longtime government employee and they're retired now. They are enjoying retirement. I'm hoping for the same. But I watched the video of, it's on YouTube, the video of the jail presentation. And I heard a number of questions. And first, let me apologize. Some of the people answering the questions have little or zero experience in the patrol world. And that's just how we are as an agency. And some of the answers were not the answers that I would have given. So, but I'm glad to hear that a lot of people live in Sheriff's Department jurisdiction. What we do, we are the primary Metropolitan Police Department for about 1 million people, but it's divided up into a lot of little places. So we have 9 contract cities, our largest being Vista at about 105,000, 110,000 people. San Marcos next at about 99,000. And a lot of the places are small town. They're suburban towns, small beach towns. And then all of the places that are not part of a city, Ramona, Valley Center, Fallbrook, Alpine, we're the police department for that as well. And then all of the rural areas, a lot of people don't know this, but everything from Julian over to Campo to Warner Springs, we have deputies who are forced to live there. They respond from home to the calls in a very old-fashioned way of doing law enforcement. The reason I say this is we have different challenges, but we also have different assets in that when you work a small town and there's only 3 deputies on a shift or 4, there's only 15, 16 of you working, and you get to know people in town. You get to know what places are in town, who to call, when to call, and it's the same sort of people. Along our training program, I have a manual that's from the academy. I don't know if that's what you were interested in. It's 138 pages on people with disabilities. We also do an annual trainings, and I sent Todd a copy of an annual training that we do. We have like an online learning management system that has trainings. But where the deputies in the field get most of their, and then we also have, we have our de-escalation training, our weapons simulator training. There is always disabilities built into the programs, even in the olden days when it was on 8mm when I was doing it. There was always going to be people with disabilities because it can be confusing. And one of the battles we have in critical situations is fighting off tunnel vision and being able to widen your eyes and taking in all the different things so you can interpret what's actually happening accurately and not misinterpret things. But where I think the big training thing that may set us apart and where I learned and where I see the people that do things is after that 6 months of academies and scenarios and whatnot, when we send people to the field, they spend 4, 5, 6 months in a training situation where the first 6 weeks is going to be sitting in the passenger seat, watching a training experienced deputy doing things every day and going into 6, 7, 8, 10 houses a day and interacting with dozens of people every day. Then they move on to where they're going to drive and their training officer will be in the passenger seat. The third phase, they might go to where the training officer wears civilian clothes. So people are forced to talk to the trainee because they can't hide behind their training officer. And the fourth phase, the training officer will be in their own car and it's called a shadow phase. We just kind of follow them around, show up on their calls, park down the street to try to so it's a slow phase in over months and months with thousands of interactions to learn things. And one of the things you learn is who lives on your beat, what to do in this situation. And there might be somebody whose sister was deaf and they know sign language, but they don't know anything about autism. Their personal lived experience didn't teach them that. And we share with each other. And what's been great in the last 5 years is the body-worn cameras. So every deputy's actions, their shift is recorded video and audio from the point of view from their chest. And anytime something goes not great or fantastic, that whole team benefits from, and that whole station will benefit from it because they're going to show those at briefings. The 30 minutes before every shift, there's a briefing and about 10 minutes of that is dedicated to learning. And we see that. Now, from my level, I watch all critical incidents where somebody's injured, and there's a panel that sits and watches these videos and sees a presentation. I'm the one that decides who gets disciplined and gets fired, where it's wrong. And the policies of this department have changed dramatically in the 30 years I've been doing this. It used to be very rigid and like stereo instructions. If this happens, you do this. If you encounter this person, you do that. And what we found is that it takes away what patrol needs to do. They need to be, if we train them with guiding principles, and this is where we are today and where we're going in the future. This is what we want to do, but we want to empower them with where they have critical thinking skills. They can exercise empathy. They can understand, yeah, this might not be, instead of giving them a book to say if A, then B, I want you to think this through. What's the right thing to do? What do you need to do? And I read a series of questions everybody had, and I listened to some of the things that my counterparts in the Detention Services Bureau couldn't answer. The jails are a lot more rigid and a lot more, because it is a controlled environment. And where we work, it's very uncontrolled. And we're going to have all kinds of things happen. And we get away from, we like our deputies, and not all police departments want to empower their people this way, but I like them to get them away from, getting them far from, you have to do this. So I was asked a question, I saw questions about, arresting somebody who might be in a wheelchair. I polled my commanders, combined, we have 120 years experience, and nobody has ever arrested a person in a wheelchair or even seen it. And we know what happens, but I just said, what would you do? What do you think the policy should say? Should we have a policy? And every one of them said, you don't have to take people to jail. There's alternatives. We have other things we can do. If someone has a disability where the jail, and since we all worked the jail in the very beginning of our careers, it isn't the place for everyone. The goal of jail before somebody goes to court is to make sure that for public safety, and to make sure they go to court. So if they're a flight risk. I don't, a lot of people with certain disabilities are not going to head to the beaches of Costa Rica to hide out over this medium level or low level thing. And they're not a flight risk. So why can't we just take this case and send it to the DA for evaluation and give them a court date? We do that, and we do that all the time. We found in COVID, we did it for people without disabilities just to reduce the amount of people in the jail. But we've been doing it before. Do we advertise it? No, we don't want people to think, well, they'll never take me to jail, so there's no consequences. But it's what we do when we encounter those things. It doesn't have to happen. And then I thought of a whole host of other scenarios, but I figured I'd give that to you guys to ask me the scenarios, and I could explain it. I read about the vans, how many vans or how many handicap capable vans do we have? So while we very rarely, ever, never seen anybody with a support animal. This is only in my world that I've had to deal with when I was the boss or I was running the station, or somebody in a wheelchair having been arrested. But I worked in the jail, and there was somebody in a wheelchair that was there for murder. And I guess they had no alternative, or whatever reason they decided to put the person there. It wasn't from my agency, and I wasn't involved in it. But I've never done that. But what I have done, what I have experienced dozens and hundreds of times, is evacuation of people with disabilities, and the challenges that we have, and the infrastructure that we need. And if you went to our website and you looked at it, you'll see that I'm the department subject matter expert for fire evacuations. And I go to the planning commission and testify. And usually the planning department will send me, when people want to build things, and get my opinion, myself and the fire chief, our opinion about that for evacuations. We have a lot of people who are disabled temporarily or just recently disabled, and they don't have the infrastructure. If you became physically disabled a month ago, you're not going to have a special van yet. You might only be disabled for 6 months or a year. So every time we evacuate a town, let's say 30,000 people, we're going to have a certain amount of people that aren't going to be able to get themselves out of there. And I can tell you, rest assured, one, we've never lost anyone on my watch that wasn't a refusal in any of the fires the sheriff's department has run. And we get most of the big ones, but we always get the resources we need. If it's not the jails providing their vans and those, it's the various transit districts. We call them up. There's this thing called the Emergency Operations Center up at the County Administration Center. It's the ground floor of the Sheriff's Dispatch Center. And we'll have our representatives from hospitals and fire departments and transit authorities and schools and all these different places, and the Red Cross. And we broker all these things, and I can bring to bear buses. And then we also have a lot of animal control, horse evacuation. All these things are all the moving parts, and we're very good at it. and I've evacuated a lot of people. My first job as a brand new sergeant in the courthouse, all my deputies had not been field trained. They were newer, they were bailiffs. So I went and got myself 5 vans and I was on disability evacuation duty. That's what we did. And if we can recruit a couple of bus drivers who are good at this and have a special bus with a lift, they're joining our team. It's ad hoc, they don't sit there all day waiting for this to happen, but you make that call and there are heroes all around the county and even in the private sector, and they all chip in. And I've seen it, I've done it, and I don't need that bus sitting at the station. Oh, I gotta see a button. Oh, somebody, I was looking at the chat in case I had a question, because I feel I'm rambling in my intro. But we do all those things because every encounter is different. Are the deputies trained to identify people with disabilities? Yes and no. They can be taught, they can be told in a classroom, they can watch a video. I don't think they're proficient until they experience it. And that's what's really nice about the video, body on camera video, is that I may not have encountered this, but I'm going to watch a debriefing tomorrow what somebody else encountered. And that's the last 2 or 3 years has been our learning, where we can force multiply our learning, because only one person got to go to that call, but we all get to experience it. And we'll talk of this. So shift sergeant will sit with their 3, 4, 5, 6 deputies, and they'll spend 10 minutes talking about how would you handle that? Notice this, notice this. Mostly people with disabilities are victims, not suspects. Now we do leverage in the field, we leverage all the pros. So we have county, HHSA has a variety of entities that can support us. When we go to a house and there's children there, we don't figure that out on our own. We call HHSA, we call somebody from, it used to be called Child Protective Services. Forgive me with my acronyms because my field days are a few years back, but they're going to come out and help us. We have Adult Protective Services. We have all these groups, and then we have non-government groups that we lean on. So every city or every town that we work in might have a different animal control and there's different one for wild and domestic. So we might call and we might find resources, but at the same time, I want my deputies to be able to do things on the fly. I personally, in Ramona, we in a lot of our stations, we have kennels for dogs. We've found them loose on the street that have tags, and we just take them to the station. In Imperial Beach, we had a place where we put the seals pups. I mean, we improvise wherever we go. Well, the seal pups will make their way into town, and deputies carry burlap sacks just to wrap around their slippery and pick them up and put them in the police car and bring them back to the station. That's what we do. And we know every place you've got to learn that certain different thing, but I want them to improvise. I want them to think. I want them to be empathetic, compassionate. They have to do a job, but there's no reason they can't do that job better. And I can tell you that I watch these videos every day and I review these cases, the good and the bad, and make corrective actions. But I'm always so impressed, especially the last couple of years, the type of deputy we're getting today. I was not that good. If I want to be honest with myself, I was probably not as good as they were. And I went 13 years in Vista without a single substantiated complaint. I saw another question that was sent to me written, which was on the complaint. I'm merging the written ones and the ones I watched in the transcript from the jail. On the complaint procedures. So we will take a complaint in any way, shape, or form. We have a form that can be mailed. We will take it over the telephone, and we will take it via email. There's a bunch of methods to reach us. They're all evaluated by internal affairs. Some of them are handled by the internal affairs division sergeants who do the investigation, and some are handled by the sergeant lieutenants at that station. Where we divide that is what the potential punishment could be. If the person could be terminated, it will be taken care of by internal affairs. Sometimes the complaint comes in and we can already tell that it's not going to result in anybody terminated because the meat of the complaint isn't a violation, it's more of a miscommunication. And then there's one person, let me see if I can remember the name. Oh, I don't think she's here. No, I think it's Jessica. I wrote it down. She talked about she went to this training with a bunch of deputies and officers and correctional officers, and she learned a lot from them and they learned a lot from her. And we have done that and we've been doing that. We just recently did it in the last year and a half with the Spanish Academy. Many of our Spanish speaking community, a lot of times we have to build trust. So what we decided to do was open it up for free and run them through academy, not running and jumping and shooting, but it explains and they get to go through and get some interaction with all the various parts of the department. And that communication bridged the gap where they understood more about us. We understood more about them. And, many of the deputies that teach the class speak Spanish, but at the same time, the perspectives might not always be the same. And we learned a lot and we have built so many bridges. I know in San Marcos, at the special ed classes, we would send deputies over there on a regular basis to go to the special ed classes and let the kids interact with the kids and let the, sometimes it's just the fun of sitting in the police car or whatever, but ask questions and interact. Those interactions happen and I get a packet. I wish I had one here because I get them every Monday, but it's Friday and by now I've already either shared it or shredded it, but I get a packet of all the photos from all the different stations and all the events that they go to. And that has been our drive for the last 18 months is law enforcement nationally has had a sort of a public relations crisis. Excuse me, it's affected our recruiting. And while none of those events happened with my agency, we're all getting the blame. And the only way we're going to change that is by interactions. The more we spend time with the community and learn about them and they learn about us is how we're bridging that gap. And we're doing it with the disabled community, but we're also looking for opportunities. Michelle?
Assistant Sheriff, can we open this up for questions?
Yes, so go to questions. So that's my presentation, if you will. But I wanted to do all Q&A because I know people have concerns and I think hopefully I have the answers.
I wanted to ask a question. This is Carolyn Smith. Since San Diego is the largest concentration of military and veterans in the nation, and I know you probably recognize PTSD as a police officer, but is there any program within your department that does sandbox or scenario training specific to like identifying and handling a call for a PTSD episode with a veteran? Yes,
and one of the reasons is that I'm familiar with this is running both my Vista and IB experience. One thing that we have a relationship with the military police in both locations too, because sometimes, well, I'll speak candidly, when you're in Imperial Beach and you have a PTSD episode with a Navy SEAL, we're probably going to lose. So we usually will just call over to Coronado and have them come help us. A lot of times that can help diffuse the situation to have the military handle, even though it's off base, they'll help us. PTSD, along with there's a couple of them that can be grouped together. I'm not a doctor, and I see there's people in this room with doctors, so in front of their names. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all of my experiences that when we approach PTSD or situations of excited delirium or people in a number of other mental crises, they can mimic each other, and actually ascertaining which one's which. You don't have a lot of time and ability to do that, but we teach people on how to handle that. We send all of our deputies to a 3-day, we call it PERT school, but it's psychological emergency response training. We have PERT teams. One of the things that we found with PTSD and in some of these things is that pointing weapons at people, telling them what to do doesn't always give us the desired effect. In fact, it backfires on us. And that's where we've leveraged what's called the mobile crisis response teams and the crisis stabilization units. And if you're not familiar with them, they're both fantastic. We've embraced them. We do handle the 911 part for them. Our deputies are aware that they're going to a call in town. And then the crisis stabilization units, we're now at 75% of the people going to them are not being brought by law enforcement. Where 20 years ago, the only way to get to county mental health was from a police car, pretty much. We're removing ourselves from the equation of crisis to treatment, and you don't require police transport. And that's helpful because with PTSD and some of the other crises, it can make it worse to have law enforcement there. It just depends on the situation. Sometimes with the military, having people with a military bearing or the actual military police coming, it's more effective. So, since speaking the same language, we are fortunate in that we have quite a few veterans. So you're not going to have a team out there that doesn't have at least a veteran. on it, and a lot of times they recognize it. But we mixed it into the 3-day PERT course. I've attended it. It does cover a gamut, you know, wide gamut of things. So, and I'm glad to see you back on, because we have a couple of veterans, including with lower extremity disabilities, that we hired to be dispatchers, because they have you don't need your lower extremities. We have people in wheelchairs that work as 911 dispatchers and operators, and we found that sometimes that military experience helps them. It's very beneficial when they're dealing with people calling in crisis all the time.
Do we have
So-
any other questions? I
Sure.
want to be conscious of the time.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Carolyn?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
If anyone has their hand raised, go either Katie call on them or go ahead and just start speaking, introducing yourself first. I'm surprised. So I know when I'll just ask this because I did have this conversation a little bit earlier today, but just so the group can hear the answer, I know that one of the concerns that Jose had, and also actually Jessica, Jessica talked about the program, and maybe you could bring that up so it comes directly from you about the adult protective, because I don't want to use the wrong verbiage. And the other question had come up about service animals, and I know you broached it with me, but maybe just letting the group know about how that would be dealt with. But Jessica, if you would first ask about the home, especially when you're encountering houseless people, or just in general, there's vulnerable communities that how your officers are trained. Jessica?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I believe that you're referring to the Take Me Home program, which was
one.
originally embraced by the sheriff. I'm sorry, sir. Didn't mean to
Oh, I'm sorry. I
interrupt you.
said that. I meant to bring that one up. I remember when we started that.
Okay,
First.
great. Yeah, I look forward to hearing what you have to say about it. I know that with my own personal experiences, with my unique set of disabilities, I think that program can be a very impactful way to let officers know how to better help a person with special needs, and would definitely like to work with you guys on making some improvements to it, and having it trained in a way where it really actualizes on the streets with interactions with deputies.
Yeah, and we can certainly explore that. I'm drawing on my experience from Ramona when it first started there. I know the technology keeps advancing. It used to be fairly basic, where it was info sheets on people that might in town, and it was all voluntary. And I know that we had people with Alzheimer's that the senior volunteers would change batteries on a watch-like GPS device that they wore, and we had sort of an info sheet. There was a binder. That's how archaic it was. And, if you found somebody on the street and you felt like there might be a problem, somebody would go to the station and get the binder and see if they were in the binder, and so we could find their contact info. I know it's made advances. I know the senior volunteers, and that's another area where there's more of them than there are deputies in some towns, and they do a lot of the community caretaking, the "You Are Not Alone," the checking. They call a few times a week, check personally on people that are in their homes that, they don't have people that are checking on them and might have an issue or two. And we have them do a lot of that community caretaking, because they won't get pulled away for an emergency call. They can stay with that. There's there's been a couple of programs, and I thought a lot of the GPS tracking device things or pre-populating. We have a thing in our CAD system called premise history, so that if you're going to a house, and let's just say 2 years ago we went to a house and there was a person there, and name the disability. You know, the person in the house is deaf or blind, whatever you want to do. We enter it in the computer afterwards. Now that we have a computer-aided dispatch system, and then a year from now, when somebody gets a call, or 2 years from now, it's going to let that officer know that there was a person named this that lived at that house that had this disability, as opposed to the cops just having to use their beat knowledge and their memory of I've been here before. And that sort of premise history, it helps. I would love for the Take Me Home program to expand. I would love for us to have the more info we have on who needs what, and it just makes us have a better job. And one last thing I did get to throw in is anybody that lives in the North County, if you've ever had a chance to see, this is brand new, but it's called One Safe Place. And this is sort of our new resource. It's piloted by the district attorney's office, and almost every government entity is there. And we can take a victim there. And literally HHSA has people there. Palomar Hospital's got people there. There's psychiatrists there. The sexual assault response team nurses, that can be done there. All police departments in the North County have a detective assigned there. There's a district attorney there. And for somebody with a disability who, let's say they're a crime victim, instead of making them go all around town and go here, go to Vista and see the DA, and go to Escondido and see this one-stop shop. And I think it's one of the neatest things that a deputy can, bring someone there, and they're going, it's a warm handoff, but then every service and every victim service and the DA's victim witness service is all going to be handled seamlessly at one. It's like an HMO for public service, if you will. And I mentioned it to Todd because I said, hey, if you ever get a chance to get somebody from One Safe Place to speak and to show all the things that they do, I hope that's the future too. It isn't cheap. A lot of people have, a lot of government entities and non-government entities have invested in it, but they're super proud of it. And right now that one's in the North County, but like all things, you do it well, and then you start moving it around. And Jessica, if I can have your info, I can definitely put you in charge or connect you with the patrol commander. Because if you've got recommendations on how we can improve Take Me Home or expand it, I loved it because it went from nothing to suddenly we now have information and connection with people. We weren't square one when somebody went missing or somebody needed something.
Assistant Sheriff, this is Todd Hood. I was wondering, what are the mechanisms for the Sheriff's Department to hear from the community? What type of community interaction do you have, or community groups? Any community groups?
So quite a few, but we like it to be, we push it down to the local level. So we have 18 tribal entities that we are the law enforcement for, and 9 contract cities and another 15 towns. When you're the Imperial Beach lieutenant and you're the station commander, you're going to be at the city council meetings. You're going to go to the Chamber of Commerce meetings. You're going to go any place anybody invites you to go. You go to a lot of this breakfast or that luncheon, and when you're there, you connect with people. You try to piggyback on other events and other community events that are already happening, because not a lot of people want to come out and just talk to the station lieutenant. So you go to you meet them where they're at, and if they're at this festival, go there, wear your uniform and talk to people. That on a global scale, we have we have a community inclusion director, and she's assisting all of them at their various places. But I really like to think I've got 22 sort of public relations people rather than a centralized one, and I want them attending. So if you're in Valley Center, you're going to interact with your 5 tribes and the Farm Bureau and other things that are important in Valley Center. If you're working the coast, you're one of the coastal towns, they have their events in their communities. The person at Rancho San Diego, they've got a robust Chaldean community, and they're going to be going to their events. So the reality is it doesn't one size fits all very well, because we are a collection of lots of little communities, and they're not exactly like each other. They can be different from each other. What's important to Del Mar isn't necessarily important to Poway. And so I want my police chiefs, the 20 of them I have, the station commanders, I want them in their community talking, and they are empowered with making decisions and doing things. And we actually have a monthly meeting where all 20 of those have to come together, and we call it used to be an accountability meeting like you've seen on TV, where the various sector chiefs or police chief gets yelled at for their crime rate. And that has changed. And that is now trends and community priorities. And the reason it's community priorities is I want those police chiefs doing what's important to their community, not what's important to me. So if I'm worried about the robbery numbers, but their town is not, they're worried about the graffiti, you need to address the graffiti. If this town is worried about, I mean, I've been in Ramona and it's about dirt bikes and horses. If that's the issues, those are the groups I'm talking to. The equestrian community is a real community, and you need to know who they are. So how do we do it? We do it in a lot of little teeny ways. And that requires weekly. And then those captains are forced to, at that meeting, list all of the events and meetings that they went to. So that's the latest drive. That's the last 12 months. Post-COVID, we came out of it with, we got to build these relationships again. And I need you in this stuff every week.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
So did I pass?
Are there any other questions or things that we would like to bring up for further discovery?
Hi, this is Susan Madison. I don't know if public can ask questions or if it's against the protocol, but
Go ahead, Susan.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much for your presentation. You mentioned that many people with disabilities are usually much more inclined to be the victim rather than the perpetrator. And I'm wondering if you track, I think personally, I believe there's a lot of hate crimes against people with disabilities. And I know the data is hard and some people track it and some people don't. And it's not pulled together in a regular, consistent way. But I'm wondering if you track anything like that or have data around that.
So we do. We are probably the most data-driven department, if not, and I know in the region and probably the country. We have in excess of 25 crime and intelligence analysts who at each station has one. And then there's one assigned to every division. So from narcotics to homicide, they'll have a crime and intelligence analyst. These are highly trained people that do a lot of analysis work, because intelligence-led policing is sort of the direction that we went in a couple of years ago, as to sort of bang for the buck and to identify trends as they're happening. And with all this data out there, organizing it and figuring it out is paramount. I know a lot of other police agencies might have one or two or three, but we're well into the mid-20s. And so that's the bigger stations will have two, smaller stations will have one. But as if I'm a lieutenant or a captain, every day I'm going over there, and then I have analysts that work for me, and I'll ask them stuff just like you said. You know, hey, is there any numbers on this? I've noticed a trend, because I get notified of all these events. So I turned my phones on silent when we started, but usually every hour I get a phone call, certain events I have to be notified of. And I'll notice a trend, but I want to make sure it's not anecdotal. I just, does it seem like, hey, these domestic violence murders, there's been 3 of them. I mean, is this a trend? Give me a 10-year history of it. Compare it. Is it up? Is it down? When we do identify trends, like ghost guns was a trend, there's certain trends in certain areas. But as far as hate crimes, it's not loosely tracked. It is seriously tracked. And the problem I think sometimes happens is the definition of hate crime.
Yeah.
So, and the definition is the person was chosen as a victim because of something. Now, if two people of a different race, or one person's disabled and one not, get in a fight over a girl, that isn't why they were targeted. This beef is separate. So it's not a hate crime, even though one of the people might be a member of a protected group. So you got to kind of dig into the story. And sometimes Twitter doesn't dig in. They take what somebody said, and then it looks like, well, we're ignoring a hate crime. Hate crime against people with disabilities. So this is where I think you're right, in that it's vague in the federal definition and the state definition. I believe it's not new, but I believe people with disabilities have been targeted by opportunistic people like thieves. But that doesn't meet the definition of a hate crime.
Right.
They're
Okay,
just,
you have, I think I would like to tailgate on that. I think that's
okay.
excellent, Susan. I appreciate that. Is there, if I were to put in a Records Act request, would I be able to know how many disabled people, and specifically where they had reported crimes, or you were part of your investigation? Like a number and the specific.
Yeah. So, so understand Public Records Act request is you're requesting a document that exists. This would be a custom, so I'd have to order the document to be investigated and created, and then you could request it. It's not a Public Records Act request, or not research grants. I want to see something you already made. And when we look at hate crimes, perceived and known disability, that's where I'd say we're not accurate. Because if somebody doesn't report a disability and it isn't obvious, you're going to miss numbers. So if I gave you that number, I think it's an undercount. And that's because you don't have to tell me that there are people there. I mean, literally there's people that are hard of hearing, but you wouldn't know it if they didn't tell you. So I'm going to miss that number. Where I mean the victims is people that have mobility issues when they're, I personally was a deputy when somebody was robbed or purse snatched or whatever, knowing they can't be chased or fought back. I think that exists. Is that a hate crime? It's not, but they're a victim. And I could probably get that number. You wouldn't need a Public Records Act. It's not a secret number, but we're going to miss the ones that we didn't know had a disability, and they're not required if they don't volunteer that information. Does that make sense, Michelle?
Yeah, I just think that Susan was on a great track. I get that it would be an undercount, but I just wondered if that was a bail.
Why don't I do this? I'll actually order the research and I'll send it to Todd to see if we see a trend or a percentage. A raw number may not help you because you need to balance it with the total numbers. And we like to look at, is this going up? Is this going down? Et cetera. But I'll actually pull that number. There's nothing secret with that. And there isn't a CPRA because it's not there. I'll just make a researcher find it for me.
We would appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you.
Hey, sir, it's Carolyn. I have a question. Is your Intel side, are they digging into the more disruptive technology like AI to help you advance your reports and whatnot quicker, faster, more efficient?
Yeah, and you were the military police, right?
Yes, sir.
So half of my intelligence analysts I poach from the FBI and from DoD. So they all come with a different level of experience, but they don't get launched around the country. And I offer 6 figures, so I'm able to coax a lot of already trained federal analysts, and then I have local analysts that come up through the ranks. So they all these 25 bring a different skill set. We have a variety of things that we use. A variety of programs that we use to passively find patterns. At the same time, we do what I just said, which is I'll just ask them, hey, give me these numbers, compare them off for a couple of years. But there's also some passive stuff. And then our criminal intelligence unit and the law enforcement coordination center that we have 4 or 5 analysts at, that's a fusion center here in San Diego with every agency's got people at. They're kind of all doing different things. But as far as getting into what programs, those are changing all the time. The technologies are always emerging. I think the LACC had Palantir for a while. I mean, they use a lot of different programs, but it seems like every 6 months there's new stuff. And I signed the paperwork to pay for these very expensive programs, but we have passive, we have sort of state-of-the-art or AI, if you will, to learn patterns. And a lot of times it just boils down to crackerjack analysts, watching numbers, watching things, monitoring social media, finding things out before they happen, get into predictive analysis. All of that and that is how, and this is where I'm going to pat my agency on the back. That is how, as a metropolitan area, we have the lowest crime rate in the country for a metro area. And we're doing it with a fraction of the officers. In Philadelphia or Chicago or some of these other metros, they have 4 times the amount of officers per 1,000 residents than we're able to get by. And everybody would love our crime rates and everybody would love our solve rates. We're just fortunate here.
Chair, just as a time check, we are right at about 3 o'clock.
Okay. We really appreciate your coming and speaking with us and being willing to proactively look at that our vulnerable population. And if people come up with more thoughts after your presentation, which is common, then we would love to be able to continue the conversation.
Sure.
I know-
Like I said at the beginning, I'm retiring March 23rd, but I will be replaced by somebody who would probably even speak shorter than I did, and I won't ramble on so much. But they'll have 30 years experience as well. I will try to, in the next week or two, get that research that Susan brought up and get it to Todd. At least get a number to see if we can't see a raw number, and if there's if there's a trend, then we'll figure out a way to address it. The other big gap is it's only going to cover our service area, which is only about 1/4 of this county. The agency that would do research on this that would be great to ask would be Sandat, because all the police agencies report to them, and then they produce a variety of products that show those things. But I'll do it just in our area and see if we've seen anything. Doesn't mean it's not happening. It's just not happening in my jurisdiction.
What
And
is your,
Chair
can you give me
Brown,
the,
just if you'll get the chance to debrief with your successor, and then definitely let them know about the Committee for Persons with Disabilities and some of what you have seen, and so that they can as well take into account some of the things that you
So
said.
they will be more than happy to hear all the promises I made.
can you just briefly describe the boundaries of what area you're referring to?
So we police the 9 contract cities: Vista, San Marcos, Encinitas, not Carlsbad, Del Mar, Solana Beach, Imperial Beach, Poway, Santee, and then all of the unincorporated towns of Valley Center, Fallbrook, areas with no name. It's just raw land and no people. It's probably ours. The Lights on Fire, it's probably ours. All 18 tribal nations are in sheriff's jurisdiction. But the cities that we don't police, it's easier to say, is the city of San Diego, Carlsbad, Chula Vista, National City, Oceanside, Escondido, El Cajon, La Mesa. Did I miss anybody? Carlsbad. We have all the rest. Coronado. And so we have the rest of them, but ours are mostly the smaller towns, suburbs, and rural areas. And it is a different type of law enforcement in those areas than it can be in the more metro areas.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And again, thank you for coming.
The only thing
Thank you. Happy retirement.
Thank you.
Happy 10/7 when you get there.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was a
Thank you,
pleasure
Sam.
talking.
Was there something else, or so our next agenda item
is 2343.
Okay, and that's Carolyn Smith, if I remember correctly. And Kay has joined us. I'm not. sure if
Yes,
any-
it's me. Hi, Kate Turpin. Sorry I'm late. I have a concert that Mayor Bill Wells is doing for us tomorrow that has just consumed my life. So if I have to step away, I apologize. And if anybody wants free tickets, I have some. Okay, so we should congratulate Michelle. I don't know if the team knows this, but she was officially reappointed in her seat at the Tuesday Board of Supervisors meeting. So congratulations. I was sweating bullets over that one, Michelle. But I'm glad you made it back in. As promised, I have drafted a letter for your review. It's a rough draft. I did send it for your review, but I would like to go on the record and read a letter that I did not send, which is the denial that came from the Office of the Governor, dated September 29th, 2022. It says, to the members of the California State Assembly, I'm returning Assembly Bill 2343 without my signature. This bill would, commencing July 1, 2023, require the Board of State and Community Corrections to develop and adapt minimum mental health care standards for local correctional facilities and would add both a licensed healthcare provider and a licensed mental health provider to the board. BSCC, which is the acronym for the Board of State and Community Corrections, has had a 13-member board since 2013. I'm concerned that adding 2 members unnecessarily grows the board and could impede its ability to timely carry out its mission. For this, I cannot sign the bill. Sincerely, Gavin Newsom. And as you all know, the bill got vetoed. In response to that, we have prepared a draft letter / memo to the Board of Supervisors from the Committee for Persons with Disabilities. And Katie, do you want me to read this, or has Michelle been briefed?
I have not had it read.
Okay.
I would love to read it. And just, Kate, Carolyn Smith is here from the county, also just to help us with some insight
Language.
related. I'm not sure if she may have questions about language, but it's really her department or / division, not sure what it's called, is in charge of basically the county's support and positions.
Legislative affairs.
legislation.
Oh, good.
So
Yeah.
actually,
Fine.
Kay, I'll just introduce Carolyn a little bit. But Kay, when we received the letter, I circulated it to some of our leadership just to let them know, and Carolyn informed me that the Board of Supervisors is supporting the and I'll let Carolyn go into the background of it. So this is very timely, and
But I would like Kay to read it first. Read her letter first, because I have not heard it.
okay.
Well, and I want to take note that in legislative efforts, it does take a village, and not to discredit the Board of Supervisors at all, but I do believe that us as members of the disabled community and those affected with the mental health conditions, we do have a collective, very powerful voice. And even outside of the county, if the direction that we go is that we don't do this in our official capacity, as members of the community that we're representing, I would encourage us individually to submit something as well. So do you want me to read the letter first, or do you want Caroline to brief us, Michelle?
To read it first, so that
Okay. It's
yeah.
lengthy, but it should only take a minute. Dear Board of Supervisors, as your appointed advisory committee for issues that concern people living with disabilities, we would like to direct your attention to our intent to support Assembly Bill 2343, which was proposed during the 2022 legislative session. The bill was introduced by Assembly Member Akilah Weber and co-authored by Senator Tony Atkins. We intend to support the bill in the 2022-23 legislative session when it is reintroduced for the following reasons. A, we believe the standards of care for incarcerated persons, especially for those with disabilities, should be adequate and consistent across the state. After conducting our own investigations and interviews of the San Diego County detention practices and facilities and equipment, we have concluded an area of inadequacy, particularly with accessibility and adapted equipment. B, intake staff and correctional officers should have adequate training to recognize when it is necessary to refer an incarcerated person to a medical or mental health care professional. C, correctional officers assigned to special mental health detention areas and those performing screening, medication administration, or healthcare liaison functions need pre-service training and routine refresher training in the recognition of management of inmates with significant mental health and/or what we refer to as an invisible disability. Furthermore, it has been through our own personal experience that when accessibility and modification methods that are needed for basic care needs are denied or lacking, the physical discomfort and emotional stress we experience may lead to a mental health episode. We feel that such situations can in fact be prevented if the proper resources are in place. As you can imagine, we were quite disappointed when the governor vetoed the proposed legislation on September 29th attached that would require an addition to the state correctional board, specifically a qualified mental health care professional. And then I went into the statute of the definition, which is lengthy. And then I referenced the bill itself. The committee respectfully requests your support of our intent to endorse new legislation proposed by Assemblymember Weber in the upcoming session. We have met with Dr. Weber and she is aware of our intention, and your guidance and direction on this matter is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah, Todd, if you could introduce Carolyn Smith, or if Carolyn Smith would like to introduce herself, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah,
Sure,
the
Todd,
the thought is that Carolyn has some recommendations on how how we can communicate from the committee and the way to proceed going forward. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thanks, Todd. So as I mentioned, I'm Carolyn Smith. I'm the director of the Office of Economic Development and Government Affairs, which has expanded recently. It used to just be strategy and intergovernmental affairs. And we handle the Board of Supervisors legislative program. We manage the advocacy on behalf of the county, and we track all state and federal legislation out of our office with our team of government affairs folks. And so I will do you one better than support. We are actually the sponsors of the bill. We were the sponsors of AB 2343, and we are the sponsors of what will be the legislation. We just met with our Sacramento representatives last night about our bill language to put across the desk for legislative council review by the deadline next week. So we are not only are we going to write a letter in support, but we are handling all of the heavy lifting on whatever the new bill number for this bill will be with Assemblymember Weber's office. And so beyond supporting, we are actually the sponsors, and we will be the ones handling the in-person testimony, coalescing any and all stakeholders, any feedback needed for amendments and things like that. So we are doing the heavy lifting. And so we agree with you. This bill is critically important. The legislation is important. We will, knowing from the political aspect, we will need to massage the issues that the governor had. He's not going to magically change his mind about the seats on the VSCC in the next year. So working with the Assembly member's office around what her vision for that looks like, and how we make that fit with the governor's willingness to do is. And so that will be our heavy lift for this year on that topic. I think Todd has brought up board policy 874 before. So I just wanted to highlight that this is my first time having the pleasure to meet with your committee, but I do meet with a lot of our boards and commissions on this very topic on legislative advocacy, because board policy A74 does significantly limit the role of the committee as it relates to legislative advocacy. So on behalf of the committee and the county, A74 does prohibit that advocacy. There is a specific path in item number 12 that allows you to take a vote on a position on a bill. And then your staff liaison, so I think in this case would be Todd, would send me a memo detailing your committee or commission's action and what your recommendations are. And then I would send a memo to the Board of Supervisors. In this instance, I'm not sure how you would want to word that, because the memo would be to support a bill we are already the sponsors of. So we would be supporting our own bill, which I don't know if that has the impact. I will leave that up to you all on what that wording would look like, knowing that not only will we be submitting support letters already for the bill, but we will be providing the verbal testimony. So that's just a question to pose to your committee. The other way we could go about it, and I think, you know, Kay mentioned this in the comments, is certainly everybody as individual citizens can always write their own letter. Once that bill is introduced, obviously, and begins the committee process. Or you could vote to send your feedback to our office. Just as we move through the sponsorship of that bill, you want to make sure that these are the things that we highlight as critically important, that these are the things that are most important to your committee, that you want to make sure we don't lose sight of as we advocate, which is always possible, right? We want everybody's feedback as we continue to move forward, because amendments are always taken, and so we don't want to amend something out that's critically important to the members of this committee. So that's also one way to go about it, is send a memo to our office about the components of that bill you want to see remain from last year to this year.
So Carolyn, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just have a question.
Sure.
So I'm assuming that San Diego County, as a chartered agency of the state, that you're allocated a certain number of bill drafts for various purposes each session. So how is it that are you co-sponsoring the bill in conjunction with Assemblywoman Weber? Or is the county submitting their own separate bill, and then she'll be submitting a bill as well? And how is it possible that you can sponsor a bill?
So she is the author of the bill. She's the legislative author. So we can't introduce bills on our own.
That's what I needed clarification.
Right. Yeah. The definition.
You're saying that you're sponsoring a bill, the committee is going to believe that you're actually submitting the initial proposed legislation. So you're actually supporting the bill that she's authoring, and that I'm assuming Senator Atkins will continue to co-author.
So a little bit of a difference of definition. So there's lots of bills that we support. Send a letter, do the support. When you are the sponsor of the bill, because I mean, the assembly members and the senators are very busy, and their staff is busy. They rely on subject matter experts and their lobbyists to do the heavy lifting. So she is the author of the bill, and it is up to the rules of the legislature that year if they limit bills or not. So I leave that to the state legislature. When we sponsor bills, we have 5 sponsorship proposals that our board has authored this year. We do the heavy lifting. We do the stakeholder meetings, we draft the language, and we provide the assembly members' office with that information for them to put across the desk. So we are working in lockstep with the assembly members' office for her bill. This will be her bill, and we are the sponsors.
Do you have 5 of those because that's what you're allowed to have, or do you have 5 because that's what you've chosen to have?
We could have 1,000 if we wanted. Our board has put forward 5, and don't quote me on 5. I'm trying to remember the legislative program list in my head, but I think it will be 5 that move forward this year.
So Carolyn, let me just clarify something.
Sure.
No legislative body has the ability to put forth any legislation. Only our assembly people and our state senators. Period.
Correct.
What I know that I work a lot with the legislature.
Right.
That's why Dr. Akila Weber came to speak to us.
Yes.
So Kay, none of them get to put anything through. What they can do is approach a legislator and see if the legislator wishes to sign on. And Dr. Akila Weber has every right, and knowing her, I know she will change whatever she is not comfortable with that gets presented to her. So it is not an entity like the county that would put it forth. They would talk to her, of course, but she ultimately puts forth what she believes in.
Got it.
Absolutely. And what we're able to do for her team is run to ground the things that she has questions and concerns on. And so when her team comes to us and says the assembly member wants to do this, this, and this, and she needs you to find out the answers to these questions, as the sponsor, we would run that to ground for her to assist her team with helping with what the assembly member is comfortable putting forward under her name as the author. And I will say, Michelle's 100% correct. For our other 4 bills, we seek out authors. In this case, it happened in reverse. This was actually the assembly member's idea. This is her baby, and we came on as sponsors last year to assist her, and continue to sponsors this year to help support her team. So this was 100% her idea. Her brainchild and the thing that she was passionate about. So we actually came on in reverse to assist her with this one.
So Caroline, is it procedurally, is it basically just because the committee is in the process of finalizing this very well worded, very well crafted draft? Is it procedurally then that the draft should be addressed to either me and then I forward the letter to you? And then, or yes, that's okay, because I didn't know if it should come to me and then I forward it to you and then you will present it to the board. Is that?
Sure, and I can give you just an example. Our Social Services Advisory Board takes a position on a slate of bills every year, and they usually just address the letter to the director of the Social Services Department, who is Rick Wani, and then he sends the memo. He sends a memo to me that says, attached, please find the legislation that the Social Services Advisory Board would like to take a position on. And sometimes they ask me for a report back, and sometimes they don't. It all depends on who's interested in what piece of legislation.
Okay.
So I just to add that I know that Nathan Fletcher's office has asked me, you know, where we stand on certain issues. And so I want this letter to come specifically from, this is how our city feels, period, about this. It's not, because that is where we were coming from. We didn't even know your existence. So it's coming from the committee. Now, I don't have a problem it going through you, but I do want it clear to specifically our 5 supervisors that this is coming from us and this is how we feel about it, because some of the things that are going to be important to us are maybe even having specific representation of disabled people on there. And I know when I spoke to Dr. Akila Weber, she also happens to be my assembly person, and I write to her a lot. She specifically, what we were talking about was the possibility of pulling out 1 or 2 of the other people that are specified right now currently as to forming that committee and changing that, changing that by legislation. So
you and I are on the same page. That was our suggestion as well.
So I just want that, you know, to be clear, and I just because obviously all of us can, as you said, individually lobby our legislators. We can also I just want it clear that if we're deciding this as a committee, that it is clear that it is our committee, their advisory committee, that is very passionate about this.
Yeah, so I will, I can answer that. I can provide a part A and a part B to that. Part A is, yes, I am obligated under the same board policy to send whatever you send to me to the board, all members of the Board of Supervisors. So the same board policy requires me to pass your information along with an overlay of the current analysis that we have on the legislation. So okay. I do that for every board and commission. Once it passes to me, it all goes to the Board of Supervisors. I will say, for advocacy purposes, once they pass the legislative program, they hand it off to me to handle. So if you want anything removed, you should still make sure I know. So telling them is not enough. They may not pass it back to me. You always want to make sure I know, because I'm the one that's going to handle the bill negotiation. So once they have their sponsorship or they know we support, they hand it off to me to handle the details. So I'm glad I'm here today. This is really helpful for me to be able to hear what's important to your committee as we move forward, because I want to make sure that we keep that at the forefront of mind as we work on some of these details for the legislation.
And I'll be sharing the legislative program, the current legislative program, with this committee for your review as well.
And I would like, Carolyn, perhaps have a conversation with you to talk about which of those current representatives we had talked about, just so that we're on the same page, because I know that at least I intend to help with the moving forward with the lobbying.
Absolutely.
So Carolyn, this is also Carolyn Smith. You have a great name. My question to you is because it's not in the final draft form, you're wanting us to sign on to something that really isn't even 100% crafted yet. And things within that new bill could be things that maybe the whole committee does or doesn't agree with. So are you looking to get the letter before the bill is 100% in writing? Because I think I'm missing something.
I will defer to Kay because I don't need a letter at all. It's all up to what you all want to do.
Carolyn, I will answer that. That is coming from our committee. And that is common that most advocacy organizations always send what is important to them, and then we watch as it goes through. That's part of the reason for doing it early, is that we can watch which of the committees it gets assigned to. We can have an effect and influence on that as it goes through. So it's, if you waited till it was in its final thing, it would be literally a day before it goes to the governor's office for signature and had passed. So there would be nothing for us to advocate for.
So here's what
No,
I'm
I
hearing.
recognize.
I'm hearing
Sorry,
I'm hearing Caroline Smith say that she doesn't need our letter addressed to the supervisors at all in order for her to continue her legislative work and trying to get this bill passed. So if our efforts are not going to make any difference in whether the county is able to succeed in getting this passed, I would prefer, remember, this is a letter addressed to the Board of Supervisors, letting them know of our intent. And if it's not going to be helpful, or if it's completely irrelevant, maybe what we do is not write to the Board of Supervisors at all. We just write a letter of support to Assemblywoman Weber and we copy the Board of Supervisors.
Unfortunately, that's a violation of the board policy. Board policy A74 that governs our boards and commissions is very clear that boards and commissions on behalf of the board cannot advocate directly to legislative bodies.
So Kay, it is not that it's irrelevant. And I hear what you're saying. And if we didn't have 874, I would totally be there for what you're suggesting. But we don't lose anything by going through Carolyn Smith's office. And I do think it does make a difference. It puts more strength on it. It also lets the supervisors know that their own advisory committee is, totally in support of this, of the concept, and wants to help form that concept in the most efficacious way.
And the other thing, Michelle, if I could just jump in, that would be helpful if you sent me the letter, is that when we write our support letters, I could quote you. So I could say, on behalf of the county, we have learned from our committee from persons with disabilities that this is important, and then it lends a little more credence to that argument, since it's coming from you all, and then I'm able to quote your letter in our verbal and written advocacy, which I think would be really impactful if you're still interested in.
So I got to jump in here, Todd. I have to tell you, I have a problem with this whole process. We drafted a letter because it's our intention to communicate directly with the supervisors who appointed us. The draft did not go to the supervisors. It went to county staff. And now we have county staff saying, we don't need you to communicate directly with your supervisor on this. We've got this handled. So it says the committee respectfully requests your support of our intention to endorse this new legislation. Your guidance and direction on this matter is greatly appreciated. And it appears to me that the county staff has just put the brakes on us even communicating our intention to the supervisors. I have an issue with that. So as a citizen, what I'm going to do is communicate directly with my supervisor and let him know, as a member of the disabled community, how I feel about this legislation. Because if the process,
no one's putting brakes.
I'm sorry.
Putting brakes. Actually, it's it's being facilitated even. But again, we have I've regularly stated that Section 12 of the policy A74 that governs boards, commissions, and committees, it states how the committee will execute and conduct activities. And so it's still very consistent with what we've got. And when I talked to Carol, or when I was not introduced, but when we exchanged information, I found that it's not like you have to battle to get the supervisors to pay attention to the issue. I am saying, and Carolyn's saying that, wow, this is perfect because the committee has recognized independently the importance of this and has taken steps to communicate and to voice their perspective. And it's not putting the brakes on anything, it's actually facilitating it, because what we've discussed is how you can get done what you want to get done and align with A74, with the policies that are governing boards, commissions, and committees. So it's I hope
But there's
you
no
don't-
policy, there's no policy that says we can't write a letter to our supervisors and ask for their guidance and direction. Now, if they want to write back and say everything has to go through Todd and Caroline, don't communicate with anybody about this, then that's fine. But what I'm hearing you say, and I want to hear you say it on the record, is that you don't want us to send this letter to our supervisors. And Caroline said, nor does she need this letter in order to lobby on behalf of the county.
Okay, let me state, because Carolyn, our Carolyn Smith, or the committee's Carolyn Smith, was asking Carolyn, what does she need the committee to do? And Carolyn, the county Carolyn, stated she didn't need the committee to do anything, but that doesn't mean she doesn't, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, want the committee to communicate. Quite the opposite. She just stated that if the committee communicates what you have, not just what you've drafted, but what the committee agrees to, she'd welcome that, and it would facilitate her communication during the legislative program. Now, no one is saying that you can't communicate to your supervisors. That's not, because your supervisor has directly appointed you to perform the role that you're performing. What we're talking about is when it comes to legislative matters, there is a policy and a procedure in place where the committee can operate and can conduct itself to be able to facilitate your concerns with legislative matters. And this is the procedure to do that. It doesn't say that we're going to get it and it's going to sit on our table. Quite the opposite. Carolyn, the county Carolyn, has said she can't. She doesn't have the ability to not forward something that she has received.
Okay, so basically, thank you, Caroline, for your very spirited and detailed description of your job and your roles and responsibilities in this. The committee needs to vote on whether they would like to move forward with proceeding and sending this letter to the supervisors or not.
So just don't want to speak on behalf of the clerk of the board, but just want to be clear that if the letter is about legislation, you still need to adhere to board policy A74. So
We're aware of that, Caroline. Thank you.
I think at this point, we can go into a discussion among the committee, but I do appreciate the presentation. I would like to have a further conversation with you, Carolyn Smith from the county. If I could get, I'm blind, so I can't, if you put something in the chat, I can't access it. But if I can get,
Michelle Todd can connect us. I'd love to connect. Thank you so much.
okay, so if I get phone number from Katie and give me a call.
Absolutely.
I'll get we'll make sure she gets, you all get each other's information.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Todd, if I can add something, I just want to correct the record a little bit real quick. I didn't ask her what she needed from the committee. I asked if there was going to be any changes to the legislation, because if there was, the letter may not align with every committee member. So I just want to make just that slight correction on the record that of what I actually said.
Okay. Heard and noted. There will definitely be changes in the legislation. I've never seen a piece of legislation go through from the beginning to the end without any changes. So I guess at this point, maybe we should address Kay's concern within the committee and work with that, if that's okay, Carolyn. And I really appreciate knowing, you know, that you were gonna go from here with, you know, with that.
Thank you.
What I'm hearing from you, Kay, really didn't have anything to do per se with this specific piece of legislation. It's the whole process, and it's a feeling of, why are you having an advisory committee if we're not able to, as a committee, bring to you directly concerns? And I get it. I don't disagree with that. And I'm used to just dealing with, well, what is the situation? So I'm just gonna suggest, there's no limit to you or myself or anyone else on the committee specifically just going to our own legislator. I never do that. I always go to all 5 of them. I always go to, I'm going to share whatever my personal feelings about whatever the situation is with everyone who has a vote. So there's nothing that precludes, you know, you and I as individuals, or anyone literally going to all 5 supervisors. Just what policy the county has put into place mandates that we do that directly through this legislative department, and you know, take it from there. It's a next step. I get that, but my feeling is that we should just do it and then follow up with it in any way that we're moved to do so.
So Michelle,
Okay.
here's my concern. We met with Assemblywoman Weber. She explained to us what she was trying to do and why she believed she failed. The committee who were on the call during that meeting said, you know, if you reintroduce this, we think it would be worthwhile. And then the committee, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you know, then the committee said, let's draft a letter to the Board of Supervisors and let them know that as members of the population that this legislation would affect, that we would be supportive of this. Should that be the direction that the county takes? Okay, so we draft a letter to our Board of Supervisors saying, you know, we do support this as members of the disability community. And basically, you know, we await your direction, because we don't know if they're supporting it or not. And what we're supposed to be doing is voting on the content of this letter. And instead, we get a lobbyist who works for the county who's coming on saying, you know, we're sponsoring this bill. And, you know, and she's taken it to a level that we're really just not even at. We're at ground zero. Hey, should I tell Joel Anderson that this is something we would want to support? And I feel that it was overbearing. I feel that it was very controlling, and I feel that it was completely unnecessary. So what's on the agenda is that we're going to review the language of this letter that is going to our supervisors seeking direction. Not that we need to get Caroline's permission, not that we need Caroline to educate us on what our powers are and are not, that we need to decide what we're going to do with this letter.
I think there was a missing piece, at least I'll say for me, there was a missing piece of information, which I did not know, which was that the county had already actually voted on supporting this piece of legislation in the previous legislative session. I was unaware of that, and I'm guessing that all of us were
No,
unaware
we knew that because it was stated during the presentation with Dr. Weber.
that the county had already signed on.
Yeah, that the county had in fact supported it.
So I missed that then. But at this point, I know that what you're suggesting is that I don't have any, I would have some suggestions that maybe we would add a little, a sentence to the legislation, just in terms of some options for being specifically inclusive, like either the possibility that, at least, 1 or 2 or a quarter of the people have some actual experience with disabilities or something of that nature, and the possibility, as was stated, that, maybe looking at the list of the current representatives, and saying, well, maybe we don't need, 5 chiefs of police, or maybe.
Or maybe, if the county's got this handled, maybe we just, move on to another initiative. I mean, we don't need to do this if they're so confident that they've got this in the bag.
I didn't hear that they're confident that they have it in the bag. What I heard was that they are supportive of it, and our support adds fire to that. And it does help.
But the agenda item, Michelle, is to draft and vote on a letter to send to the Board of Supervisors. And while we're in the midst of doing that, we have a county employee who interrupts our presentation and speaks for a very long period of time, basically about how this is her side of the street and she's got this handled. So I could be reading in between the lines, but my take on this is that this letter to the Board of Supervisors got hijacked by the county staff before it even got reviewed by the committee, and that they don't really see any need for it. So I'm the one that drafted the letter. I'm the one that did the legislative research on it. I'm the one that's going to have to finalize the letter and mail it out to the supervisors. And I'm not going to waste my time if it's something that the county isn't fully supporting. And it didn't sound to me, and I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee, that she was super happy about this.
Yeah, I'm actually aligning with how you took her, the other Carolyn. Her approach to this was really disruptive advocacy towards an advisory group. So that was a little off-putting.
So I just want to put in something. Todd did call me and tell me that this legislative department, again, I don't know the terminology, existed, and he had read to us 847 previously and asked if it would be okay to add Carolyn to the agenda. So I need to say that I did say, yes, if this is existing and we are gonna, and they have already weighed in with the supervisors, it would be helpful information for us to have. So
Michelle, she was not added to the agenda, and it doesn't say discussion with county staff, that there's nothing that alludes to her presentation at all. The agenda actually says draft and vote on a letter to the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, and if
So-
I remember correctly, correct me, Todd, I believe that when he brought it to me, it was after the agenda was posted. Is that accurate?
Well, the issue, there's a couple of things here, and I don't know, I don't know specifically what the issue is, but I've said it a couple times, and I'm surprised that you all are hearing it differently, but no one is stopping your letter from going forward. The discussion, the item on the agenda was there. And because we knew that this letter was in process, we wanted to make sure that we gave the committee the full picture, so that as you are drafting the letter, then you can determine if there are any changes that need to be made to that letter. Whether it needs to, instead of saying the intent is to support or whatever, we wanted to, basically, I brought Carolyn on to share more background that relates to the drafting, the review and drafting of the letter, who it should go to, and basically the only thing was who it should go to, and to follow the process according to the policies and procedures that all committees agree to follow. I understand how it might feel, but that there is nothing that supports you feeling that there is a stopgap, or that there is something that is stopping you, or that there is no desire for the committee, for the county to support what the committee wants to communicate out to the supervisors. That hasn't been stated at all. Quite the opposite. It was stated that this is how to communicate that to the supervisors on this particular legislative matter. So it wasn't that when we have an agenda item, it doesn't go into the specifics of how the agenda item is going to be executed. But you know, the main thing was to be able to make sure that the committee had the background on the procedure to follow for legislative matters.
So Todd, if I'm hearing you correctly, you and the lobbyists at the county have made.
I don't know.
You and Caroline, or whatever her title is,
She's
have
an
made the
employee.
assumption that because we wanted to express our support to the Board of Supervisors, that somehow we would be lobbying this bill.
See, you're using terms that I don't think anyone else but you've used. Lobbying and, you know, and lobbying.
You reference to, you know, what we're allowed and not allowed to do in the confines of our charter and the rules and regulations of board and commissions. But since you have made reference of that so many times, as Caroline did, can you be more specific about what your concerns are and us violating those?
Oh, it's not concerns about you violating it. It is, and I can bring it up. It's A74. It's policy A74.
We're aware of the policies, but how does our direct letter to the Board of Supervisors violate A74? Or what are your concerns? Or how do you even tie this letter into a violation of A74?
Like, what would happen if we sent it directly?
All I'm saying is, for legislative matters, there's a policy specifically for legislative matters.
Difference is, instead of us sending it,
It's not going to the California State Legislature. It's going to the people who appointed us.
Right, but it's regarding non-county legislation.
But if you're sponsoring the bill, how is it non-county legislation?
State
You
legislation.
know what, I'm gonna take a break.
That,
What I heard was, and maybe this is just a major oversimplification of the whole thing, was instead of this letter, which I think is very well written and stated, being directed to each of the 5 supervisors, that there is a different process that the letter needs to go to you, Todd, or to Carolyn, and then it gets packaged in some way and sent on to
Same
the
letter.
Board of Supervisors.
It's the same letter.
and Todd,
It just gets delivered differently
we
and maybe
introduced-
doesn't have as much of an impact. Maybe the concern is that it doesn't have as much of an impact because it's coming sort of bundled with other things, sort of with somebody else's viewpoint attached to it.
Can I ask you speaking?
That was Jeanette.
Okay, I just couldn't tell who it was. Thanks. I can hear that Kay is frustrated at having to go through more layers than just the direct contact. I'm not quite sure how to allay that, but I do think that the letter I did have some minor suggestions, just in making it, I think, slightly stronger by giving some possible scenarios which could build on other scenarios that are not listed in that. But other than that, I think, again, I guess we can have a vote. What I'm hearing Kay say is that she would like to just send it directly. And it is true that those supervisors are the ones who appointed us. Maybe the solution is, or the compromise is, because there's nothing that stops any of us directly from communicating with our supervisor, is to send that and say, this is what our committee voted on, and we have sent it to the legislative department. You will be getting it. This is a heads up that, I wanted to report to you that this is where our committee stands on this legislation. So in other words, it would get to them twice.
The best thing I could do in the middle ground is make a motion to table this for February.
I second that motion. This is Sherry.
I mean, we can vote on it. I'm gonna vote no on that. I think that there's no reason to table it. It's not gonna change. Kay has done the work.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but if a motion's made and we have a second, we have to vote on it.
I repeat, we have discussion on it, Carolyn. And also, we also usually recognize people when we're talking about a motion. So I'm just saying that there's not a reason to delay it, and yes, we can take, do other people want to comment on it? I don't see a reason to delay it. It's going to be the same in a month. And honestly, that dilutes the whole purpose of why we did this. The legislative agenda is going out at the end of January. It makes it meaningless if you're waiting until February to send something to support something
coming up to be about time, isn't it?
we're dealing with now.
It's gonna be a good crop this year. We usually make jam.
Jessica, do you want to weigh in? And I
They
don't
need
know
to
who,
put their
Thank you.
on mute.
Do you think you could do some trimming and shaking of that snow bush? It's taken over the front yard.
Who is talking in the background?
Oh, sorry.
So from a timing standpoint, we're at 3:55. So if there's no more discussion, there would need to be a vote.
does anyone else want to weigh in on it? I know we have Kay, Jeanette, and Jessica that we'll do the vote, but is there any other points for the discussion?
This is Jessica, and I just want to be really honest. I'm learning a lot as we go, and I don't think that I could add anything valuable to the discussion.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do a vote. Do you want to do a roll call? Let's do a roll call vote.
To clarify, is this a vote on the motion to delay till February?
Yes.
Okay. Carolyn. How do you vote?
Yes, I vote yes for delay.
Sherry, how do you vote?
Yes, for a delay.
Michelle, how do you vote?
No.
Jessica, how do you vote?
Can I go last?
Okay. Jeanette, how do you vote?
I vote no.
Kay, how do you vote?
I vote no.
Jessica, you're the last vote.
Okay, I'm going to go with no with the group consensus.
Okay, there are 4 no's and 2 yeses.
So moving forward, Kay, how would it, I mean, just in terms of this, the way I analyze it is this something that needs to be our energetic fight as to the process? And for me, the process cumbersome as it is, and perhaps somewhat lacking of support in the ways that we would like, is the process. So if we compromised by individually sending the letter and just saying, hey, our committee, we want you to know, our committee has sent this on as per the requirements for the county to the legislative department to be forwarded to you. I just wanted you to know that this is what just came up at our meeting and that this is important.
My understanding is there's nothing in our charter or the boards and commission regulations that say we cannot communicate directly with our supervisors, that we need to send this to any county department for their facilitation of communication, that we can in fact communicate directly with our supervisors. So my recommendation would be that there was one, Jeanette put in the post on the meeting chat, public post, that she had one edit, which I can make a correction on, but the letter is actually respectfully submitted by Michelle, committee chair. So I would recommend that we send it forth as it's stated on the agenda. And if the county staff have a problem with our communications to the supervisor, I'm sure at some point we'll be put in check by one of the attorneys. Sure how that's going to work, but you know, we might want to give Caroline a courtesy copy, or her boss a courtesy copy of it, but I don't know that we need to go through her in order to communicate with the supervisors.
I think this is a bigger issue, and I'm happy to continue that. And my suggestion stands that I would like to see us just do it to both. And I do have some two minor edits. One is to use Dr. Keela Weber as opposed to just Assemblywoman Akila Weber. And The other thing, and this I'm not vested in, but I thought that perhaps we might put in a sentence or two, just as we had the discussion about, you know, maybe looking at who is actually on that committee and making that somehow fit, unless you think that that's too much into the weeds for the letter, and then I'm fine.
I think it's a little too much, because basically we're respectfully request their support of our intention. And we can take out the word endorse. I think that's probably what got some of the staff people in such a disarray. We can certainly remove that. And Todd, for future reference, if somebody's going to be added to the agenda, personally, I don't want to be blindsided by it during my presentations. It would be nice if I could have a courtesy call and given a heads up.
So,
And do you want to
Right.
address the letter to the Board of Supervisors and to Caroline Smith, Michelle?
we might be able to do that. I was just gonna send 2 separate copies, so
Okay.
it's not an issue. I mean, I just don't think this is what we, I agree, I don't like it, but I don't think this is where we need to have our fight about
Right.
this. I think the
Well,
issue is,
I think typically what we would do, because she's a subordinate of a subordinate, is we would probably need to copy the CAO, and then that person would appropriately send it on to the department or division director, right?
in this case, it says specifically to send it to that department.
Okay.
That's the only reason I think that it makes sense to do that. Do you have any problem with using Dr. Keeler Weber?
No, it actually references doctor in here, except for the quote from the governor who refers to as assembly member.
Okay, that's,
I can change all of it.
yeah, that's fine. If you're quoting the governor and he used assembly member, that's fine.
But we
But,
do address her properly. in
Okay.
Part of the letter.
That was just a tiny
Okay.
edit.
Okay, so then I will send the final draft, I guess, Katie, to you, and then you can get it to Michelle for signature and distribution. Is that how that works?
Yes, Michelle, what's the best way? Do you want me to mail the letter to you?
Let's talk about it offline
Okay.
and then figure that out. I do appreciate the work, Kay, and your research and your passion always.
I apologize, it took so long. It got done.
We all have lives, and this is volunteer.
For a time check, Chair, we're at about almost 4:05.
Okay, so can you read me the other agenda items, and let's see what we can.
An update on the clerk of the board fact sheet to reflect monthly meetings and the location and time to update that, because that still states quarterly. And then discussion on receiving and distributing county announcements so that people will be able to get announcements directly and then be able to promote that out to your constituents. And then the resolution authorizing the continuance of teleconference meetings.
So I would like to, I think it's just one or two sentences to talk about the county clerk update. It's just an issue, from what Todd explained to me, that right now it says that we, meet at the old times, that it was quarterly, and it was, I don't remember what day of the month, but if we can just, I would move that we go ahead and update that to the second Friday of the month at 2:00 from 2 to 4. And if, that changes in the future, we'll update it again. but
I'm sharing on the screen the highlighted changes. Monthly meeting, second Friday at 2 p.m. County Administration Center. We have reserved suite 302, but we have location may change, and then updating it with the revised date.
So the other thing I would want to say on it is that we are still on Zoom and make that clear. I don't really want to make that change until we're actually having to meet in person, which is not next month.
Okay,
So
and why don't we hold on this and table the change?
I would like to put in the second Tuesday of the month, monthly.
Second Tuesday of the month?
I'm sorry, second Friday of the month, monthly.
We've got, thus far, it says monthly meetings, second Friday at 2 p.m.
Todd, are we going to vote on this letter? Because I don't think there was a vote.
Okay, we'll vote on the letter, but let's just finish this. Is there any objection to putting this change into the clerk?
Are we
Hearing none.
talking about the monthly meetings?
Yeah, just changing it to update it, that it's a monthly meeting at 2 p.m., second Friday of the month.
Are we doing that now
Yes.
or waiting until we're in person?
No, we're doing it right now.
Okay.
No, we don't need to vote on this. We just need to agree on that we understand it's going to be changed. Is that right?
Which is why I said if there's no objection, then we're asking Todd to just put, and Katie to just put it through.
Okay, quick question, Michelle. Are we going to have an opportunity to discuss the date and time when, if or when we end up potentially needing to be meeting in person?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just saying for right now, I did not realize this still had quarterly. Just wanted to see that change sooner than later, that's all. And then it's from 2 to 4. So I will call for a vote on sending the letter as Kay had described. Katie, you want to do another roll call vote related to sending the letter?
Yes. 1 second.
Could we clarify the motion, Kay, as far as, or Michelle, as far as who the letter will go to and who will be copied, just so we have that.
So I have the amendments of the committee respectfully requests your support of our intention instead of the word of intent to I'm removing the word endorse and replacing it with the word support. And I have that we're supposed to send the letter to the Board of Supervisors and to Caroline Smith. And we are going to reference continue to the ending of the letter. Michelle says we have met with Dr. Weber. But during the Assembly Bill reference, she is referenced as Assembly member as Senator Tony Atkins in her official capacity as the co-sponsor of the bill.
That's fine. That part is fine. When you said that we're going to send it, I was just suggesting that we go ahead and send it directly to the legislative department and send it separately, us individually, to our supervisors, or at least to copy it to the supervisors, not to send it to them directly.
Well, then we're going to have to restructure the entire letter because it opens with as your appointed advisory committee for issues that concern people, and that would not be applicable to Caroline Smith and her capacity. So
Kate,
I actually don't have much time left to redraft, to stay on the call today and restructure the letter. So I know that we voted to approve it, but if we're going to completely restructure the letter, we might need to just override our previous motion and table this for a month.
Okay,
It's not approved.
don't,
It's not approved. We
let
didn't
me,
vote.
please let me finish. I don't think we have to restructure anything. What we are sending is to the supervisors. We are merely doing it through the protocol. We can keep it exactly with the same verbiage. And we're just sending it through the legislative office. You don't have to make any other changes related to that.
So it will be addressed, dear Board of Supervisors, via legislative office.
You don't have to say via the legislative office. We're sending it to the legislative office. They in turn will send it to the supervisors. Just keep it the way it is.
Michelle, I have a problem with that because this letter is addressed to the supervisor who appointed me. And I specifically draw on my own personal experiences as to why I think this legislation is important. And if I needed Caroline to express my feelings for me, I would have addressed the letter to Caroline. And maybe we need to go off the record again and actually read the letter. But it makes 3 key pertinent points that are very specific to us as individuals with disabilities and the challenges that we face. And I don't think it's a good idea to have her present our life experiences and our feelings on our behalf. I'm in complete and total disagreement with the interruption that we've received from the county staff and our intent to communicate our needs to the supervisors. And I feel that it's intrusive. I feel that it is a power play. And candidly, I feel that it is quite insensitive and unnecessary. I'm not even sure how I want to react to all of this, other than at this point, I'd like to just completely withdraw from the entire process. And if the committee wants to start from scratch and draft a letter to Caroline, I want to be excluded from that. I don't want her, nor do I need her or Todd speaking to Joel Anderson on my behalf.
If we did send it per their protocol to that office and individually sent it additionally, directly to our supervisor.
Letter, let me read this to you. Furthermore, it has been our own personal experiences that when accessibility and modification methods that are needed, which is bolded, for basic care are denied or lacking, the physical discomfort and emotional stress we experience may lead to a mental health episode. We feel that such situations can in fact be prevented if the proper resources are in place. Now, we're either going to address this to her or we're going to address it to the supervisors, but we're not going to address it to the supervisors and have her make this statement on our behalf. That's ludicrous.
I guess I don't see her making the statement. I see her passing along our letter exactly in the form that we send it, exactly.
Well, then we
But-
need to address a memo to her that says, Caroline, please pass this letter on to the supervisors on our behalf. And the letter should
Oh.
be addressed to the supervisors.
I'm fine to do that. And I can write that up. I'm fine to do that. That's to please pass this on exactly in the form that we wrote it. That's fine.
So we're going to draft a memo to Caroline requesting that she submit a letter on our behalf.
You keep saying submit it on our behalf. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that she send it to the supervisors.
As
As-
we've written it, not redone, just the letter.
Mhm. Okay, so with that, I make a motion that we approve the letter with its amendments that were previously stated and a cover memo addressed to Caroline Smith, asking that she submit this letter on our behalf.
And I
Second.
second that. Okay, Jeanette seconds it. That's great. So You want to do the roll call vote, Katie, please?
Yes. All right. Michelle, how do you vote to
Yes,
confirm the letter and memo?
yes,
Sherry, how do you vote to confirm the letter and memo?
I abstain.
Jeanette, how do you vote to approve the letter and memo?
I vote yes.
Hey, how do you vote to approve the letter and memo?
I vote yes.
Jessica, how do you vote to approve the letter and memo? I'm sorry, we lost Jessica. Carolyn, how do you vote to approve the letter and memo?
I abstain.
So we have 3 yeses and 2 abstentions.
okay. So, so that passes, and I think that the last, we dealt with the update for the moment of the clerk's information and part of it. And then the other item I think can be put off until February. And the last item is the resolution so that we can meet continuing on Zoom for the February meeting as a minimum.
Just one note, I'm sorry, Michelle, we did not yet vote on the December meeting minutes. We didn't have a quorum at the beginning.
Can I hear a motion to vote?
I
on-
move we approve the December meeting minutes as
This
written.
is Carolyn.
And
So that was moved by Janet and Carolyn, seconded it.
Mhm.
We'll take a vote.
any objections? Any objections? Hearing none, we approve that by acclamation. Are there any objections to tabling? Todd, what was the agenda item after the clerks?
That's the public communications, direct
Yeah.
communication subscribe, and we can put that on.
Are there any objections to tabling that to February? Hearing none, that will be tabled till February. And lastly, we have the resolution, continuing the resolution. Do I hear a motion to continue the resolution to meet on Zoom in February?
I make a motion to continue resolution as stated. This is Carolyn.
I second.
Okay, any objections? Hearing none, that passes as acclamation. I don't want to keep it any further. I do appreciate that people stick to their truths, because that honestly is what makes this committee worthwhile. So have a safe rest of the month. Happy New Year. And we will feel free to call me with comments about this or the anything else that we want to see on the agenda moving forward.
Just want to make sure that there are no serial meetings that are not public meeting, just for Brown Act transparency, but definitely.
All right, thank you.
Okay, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.